The night had settled over the village of Kristolovo like a heavy velvet curtain, soaking the world in a darkness so dense it seemed to breathe. At the far edge of the settlement, where pine forests leaned close enough to claw the rooftops, the old monastery fortress rose from the earth, its pale stones cracked, its towers hunched like tired sentinels waiting for dawn that never quite came. A cold wind slithered through its broken arches and vacant windows, carrying with it the metallic smell of approaching snow. Inside its main hall, lit only by a trembling lamp suspended from a rusted chain, Sergeant Elias Wojcik paced in tight, measured circles. His boots scraped across the ancient flagstones, each step echoing sharply in the cavernous chamber. The collapsed sections of the ceiling above formed jagged silhouettes against the darkness, like teeth he expected to close around him at any moment. He paused, listened. Nothing but wind, and yet the others had heard it. He exhaled, fogging the frozen air. They were exhausted, cold, nerves cracking, but the thought did nothing to still the knot tightening behind his ribs. At the far end of the hall, beside a row of crumbling stone pillars, Private Marek Yasinski crouched near a lantern, rubbing his palms together furiously. His breath came in soft puffs of steam. Despite his bulky coat, he shivered so violently that the metal buckles of his vest rattled. "You heard it too, Sergeant," Marek whispered. His voice wavered. "The walls, they spoke." Elias didn't look at him immediately. He scanned the shadows first, because habit demanded it, because instinct screamed it, and only then lowered his gaze to the young soldier's face. Marek was barely 20, but the fear in his eyes made him look years older. His pupils were wide, almost devouring the faint light. "What exactly did you hear?" Elias asked, his tone severe but not unkind. Marek swallowed. "A whisper. Not words, more like breath, like the stone itself was warning us." The lamp above flickered at that exact moment. Elias felt the hair on his arms rise. Behind Marek, two other soldiers, Aniela Rybak and Tomek Sobieski, sat shoulder to shoulder near a fallen beam. Their rifles rested on their knees, untouched since they'd barricaded themselves inside the fortress after the unexpected ambush on the mountain trail. The enemy patrol that had scattered them hours earlier still haunted the forest beyond the walls, torches bobbing between the trees like restless spirits. Aniela rubbed her temples. Her dark braid had come undone, spilling around her face in messy curls. Her usually composed expression had cracked open with fatigue. "It wasn't just Marek," she murmured. "I heard something too. Not whispering, more like pressure. As if someone pressed their mouth against the stone and breathed out." Tomek nodded, jaw clenched. "Same, and every time it happened, dust fell from the ceiling, almost like the fortress reacted." Elias crossed his arms, forcing his breath steady. Snowflakes drifted through the shattered windows, catching the lantern glow like falling embers. "This building is centuries old," Elias countered. "It groans, shifts. The wind travels through cracks you can't see." He stepped closer to the central pillar, the tallest, widest, the one still bearing the weight of the collapsed tower above. He pressed his palm against the cold stone. "It's not whispering." But as he said it, he felt something beneath his fingertips, a vibration, subtle, a faint tremor, like a sigh exhaled from deep within the rock. He pulled his hand back sharply. Marek saw. "You felt it." "It's old stone," Elias snapped. Except his voice wasn't as firm as he wished. Outside the fortress, the wind shifted. It howled low, curling around the towers. Something thudded in the courtyard. Elias hoped snow sliding from a roof, but none of the soldiers looked convinced. Aniela rose unsteadily, brushing frost from her coat. "We shouldn't stay here. This place is falling apart around us." "And go where?" Tomek retorted. His voice cracked on the last word. Into the forest, where we don't know how many patrols are hunting us, where we can't see more than 10 meters ahead? Elias turned toward the massive wooden doors they'd shut hours earlier. Snow pressed against them from the outside, burying the frame in white. The storm was worsening by the minute. Escape wasn't an option, not yet. He walked back to the group, exhaling slowly. We rest until dawn. The storm will ease by then. Once visibility improves, we find a path back to the rendezvous point. Marek flinched as another gust of wind moaned through the cracks. If the monastery's still standing by then, Elias shot him a stern look. But even he couldn't ignore the truth. The fortress trembled more now than before, as if straining under a weight not entirely physical. Snow continued to drift inside. The temperature dropped further. The lamp hissed, its flame shrinking and expanding with the irregular pulse of the wind. "Sergeant," Aniela said quietly, returning to her seat, "what if the whispers are not us imagining things?" Elias sat opposite her, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. His breath pooled white between them. "What are you suggesting?" "That this place isn't empty." A silence fell, thick, suffocating, cracking at the edges. Tomek rubbed his hands together, gaze unfocused. "My grandmother used to say these mountains are full of used spirits, that the old stones remember every death, every war, every scream. She said they talk to each other through the earth." "We're soldiers," Elias replied. "We deal with reality, not—" The stone beneath us groaned, not softly this time. Deep, resonant, a sound like the inhalation of something enormous. Dust showered from the ceiling in a thin stream, coating their shoulders. The pillar Elias had touched earlier shuddered. The lantern swayed violently, chains clanking as the flame nearly went out. Marek scrambled backward, eyes wide. "There, again, you heard it that time." Elias's heart hammered painfully in his chest. He looked toward the far corner of the hall, where the wall had a deep fissure running down from the ceiling like a dark vein. Something moved there, a shift in shadow, subtle but unmistakable. He rose slowly, reached for his flashlight. Please don't go near it." But he took a step anyway. Then another. The crack pulsed, as if air was being drawn through it, inhaled by the ancient stone. The wind outside fell silent.
Completely. The sudden stillness was unnatural, wrong in a way Elias felt deep in his bones. He held his breath. The soldiers behind him held theirs. From the fissure came a sound, a whisper. Not imagined, not mistaken. A whisper shaped like a human voice dragging across stone. Then, a low rumble. The floor trembled. The pillar groaned like a wounded beast. "Sergeant!" Maddox shouted. Elias spun around as the lantern finally gave up, its flames sputtering into darkness. Only the thin, bluish light of the storm seeped through the broken windows. The walls began to crack, real, jagged lines slicing across the stone like lightning frozen in place. Tomek jumped to his feet. "The tower's going to come down. We need to move." Elias grabbed his pack and rifle. Snow blasted through the hall as if hurled by invisible hands. He shouted, "To the west exit, now!" But before they could take a single step, the fissure at the far wall split open with a thunderous crack, expelling a burst of frigid air that slammed into them like a physical blow. Elias staggered, nearly falling. Through the swirling dust and snow, a shape formed in the opening. Not quite human, not quite shadow. Something that watched them from behind the wall. Maddox screamed. The fortress roared in protest, the ceiling shaking violently. Stones loosened overhead, one crashed to the floor, missing Angela by inches. Elias grabbed her arm and dragged her toward the western archway. "Move, now!" The structure groaned again, louder, as if the old monastery was breathing its last. But over the chaos, over the thunder of collapsing stone, Elias heard it once more. A whisper. Close. At his ear. Neojekai. Don't run. He froze. Just for a second. Long enough for him to feel the air behind him shift, warm, alive, intentional. He turned, and what he saw made his blood icy cold. The shape stepped fully through the wall. The fortress shook one final time, and the tower above them began to collapse. The collapse began with a deep rolling thunder that rose from the very bones of the monastery, an ancient, agonizing sound as if centuries of memory were finally giving way under an unbearable weight. Snow blasted inward in a swirling white fury, mixing with dust and fragments of mortar as the tower above them groaned, twisted, and buckled. Elias felt the vibration through the soles of his boots, the trembling of the stone like the shiver of a dying giant. "Go!" he roared over the deafening rumble, his voice torn raw by fear and grit. He grabbed Angela by the elbow and shoved her toward the western archway. Maddox stumbled behind them, coughing violently, one arm thrown over his face to shield himself from the storm of debris. Tomek followed last, protecting their rear, though he couldn't help but glance back, because something had stepped out of the broken wall. Snow whipped across the hall in thin needles of ice, but even through the haze, Elias could see it. The shape, tall and indistinct, its outline flickering like a reflection seen in disturbed water. It stood where the fissure had ruptured, framed by the jagged edges of stone now glowing faintly with a dull amber warmth as though lit from deep within. The air around the figure bent subtly, as though it radiated an unnatural heat. Or an unnatural presence. Elias forced himself to turn away. He wouldn't let fear root him in place again. One more moment of hesitation and the tower would bury them all. He shoved through a curtain of falling dust and vaulted over a shattered beam. The western archway was only 10 meters away, but with the fortress shaking violently beneath them, it felt like miles. Behind him he heard Maddox's panicked sobs, the clatter of loose stones cascading from the walls, Tomek shouting something he couldn't make out. And beneath it all, like a thread weaving through chaos, the whisper. Soft, male, intimate. Elias. His blood froze. He didn't dare look back. The west exit was nearly blocked by fragments of collapsed ceiling, but a narrow passage remained. Barely wide enough for a single person, wind and snow poured through it in a relentless stream, carrying the scent of pine sap and distant fire. Angela reached it first, dropping to her knees to crawl under a fallen arch. She winced as her shoulder scraped against sharp stone, but pushed forward, forcing her body through the narrow opening. Elias motioned for Maddox next. "Move! Don't stop!" he barked. But Maddox hesitated, staring past Elias, his face pale, his breath a trembling cloud. "Sergeant! It's walking!" Elias grabbed the front of his coat and shoved him toward the opening. "I said move!" Maddox stumbled, dropped to his hands, and forced himself into the gap. Tomek crouched behind him, urging him on. The hall behind them trembled violently. A ceiling beam snapped with a deafening crack. Light flickered, an impossible, unnatural glow rising from the figure that had stepped through the stone. Elias didn't look. Couldn't. His throat tightened against the urge to glance back, but instinct screamed that facing it would be a fatal mistake. He dropped to his knees, lowered his head to the cold stone, and crawled into the narrow opening. Snow and frigid wind slammed against him immediately, yanking his breath away. The world outside was a roaring white void, dark pine silhouettes swaying violently, the storm swirling around the ruins like a living, hungry thing. He crawled faster. Behind him, Tomek was halfway into the passage, boots scraping erratically as he kicked away debris. "Sergeant, it's—" His sentence was drowned by the roar of the collapsing tower. The monastery shook so violently Elias felt the vibration in his teeth. He pushed through the last meter of the gap and erupted into the open courtyard, rolling through snow that swallowed his body to the elbow.
Angela stumbled to her feet. "Where's—" Elias didn't answer. He turned back just as Maddox crawled out, gasping for air, followed by Tomek emerging in a desperate scramble. But before Tomek's boots cleared the gap completely, a burst of hot amber light illuminated the narrow passage behind them. The fissure inside the hall glowed like molten metal, casting long shadows across Tomek's back. He screamed. Elias lunged forward, grabbed Tomek's wrist, and yanked with everything he had. Tomek slid free just as the passage behind them caved in, burying the opening in a thunderous avalanche of stone and snow.
The shockwave threw all four of them backward. Elias slammed into the snow, the cold biting deeply into his spine. The old tower collapsed entirely, sending a plume of dust skyward that mingled with the storm until sky and ruin seemed indistinguishable. For a long moment, the world was only wind and the muffled thud of distant stones finding their final resting place. Elias pushed himself upright slowly, muscles trembling. "Everyone alive," he rasped. Angela nodded weakly, gripping her arm where blood seeped through her sleeve. Marek coughed, but raised a shaky hand. Tomek rolled onto his back, wheezing, one leg twitching in pain. "Barely. That thing. What the hell was that?" Elias looked at the sealed ruin. The gap was gone, entirely, as though it had never existed. The monastery's interior lay buried under tons of stone. And yet, the whisper reached him through the wind. Faint, fragile, terrifying. "Nishkoncheleshme. We are not finished." Elias's breath hitched, but the others hadn't heard it. Angela limped closer to him. "Sergeant, what now?" He scanned the forest beyond the courtyard. The storm was easing just enough for him to see the tree line clearly, a dark, dense wall of pine and shadow. Their footprints from earlier were long erased. The enemy patrol could be anywhere. And behind them lay the ruins of a monastery that seemed determined to keep its dead company. "We head west," Elias said. "Find the trail, regroup with the others. Whatever happened in there, we leave it behind." Tomek struggled to stand, leaning heavily on Marek. "God, I hope you're right." But as they turned toward the trees, Elias felt it, an uncomfortable certainty settling in his chest like a stone. Whatever stepped through the wall was not trapped by the collapse. It was following them. The forest wind shifted, branches creaked, and from behind them, from somewhere deep within the ruins, a faint glow pulsed once, twice, like the beating of a distant heart. The forest swallowed them as soon as they left the last broken wall behind. Dense, towering pines leaned inward like conspirators, their snow-laden branches forming a jagged canopy that turned the sky into a narrow, bruised ribbon of gray. The storm had eased into a fine, drifting snow, each flake catching what little light remained and sinking softly onto the untouched ground. The world felt muted, sound dampened, color drained, as if they had stepped into a photograph that someone had started to erase. Elias led the way, his boots crunching through the crusted snow. Every step sank to the ankle, cold dampness seeping through his socks, gnawing steadily at his toes. He kept his rifle slung, but ready, gloved fingers brushing the stock. His breath rose in slow, controlled plumes. Years of training had taught him how to hide the shiver that passed through his body, but he felt it all the same. Behind him, Marek struggled to match his pace. The younger soldier's breath came faster, harsher, small clouds bursting from his lips. Angela limped, her hand pressing against her injured arm, the fabric beneath her palm dark and stiff. Marek coughed, but raised a shaky hand. Tomek rolled onto his back, wheezing, one leg twitching in pain. "Barely. That thing, what the hell was that?"
Elias looked at the sealed ruin. The gap was gone, entirely, as though it had never existed. The monastery's interior lay buried under tons of stone, and yet the whisper reached him through the wind. Faint, fragile, terrifying. Nishkonchelishme, we are not finished. Elias's breath hitched, but the others hadn't heard it. Anyella limped closer to him. "Sergeant, what now?" He scanned the forest beyond the courtyard. The storm was easing just enough for him to see the tree line clearly, a dark, dense wall of pine and shadow. Their footprints from earlier were long erased. The enemy patrol could be anywhere. And behind them lay the ruins of a monastery that seemed determined to keep its dead company. "We head west," Elias said. "Find the trail. Regroup with the others. Whatever happened in there, we leave it behind." Tomek struggled to stand, leaning heavily on Marek. "God, I hope you're right." But as they turned toward the trees, Elias felt it, an uncomfortable certainty settling in his chest like a stone. Whatever stepped through the wall was not trapped by the collapse. It was following them. The forest wind shifted, branches creaked, and from behind them, from somewhere deep within the ruins, a faint glow pulsed once, twice, like the beating of a distant heart. The forest swallowed them as soon as they left the last broken wall behind. Dense, towering pines leaned inward like conspirators, their snow-laden branches forming a jagged canopy that turned the sky into a narrow, bruised ribbon of gray. The storm had eased into a fine, drifting snow, each flake catching what little light remained and sinking softly onto the untouched ground. The world felt muted, sound dampened, color drained, as if they had stepped into a photograph that someone had started to erase. Elias led the way, his boots crunching through the crusted snow. Every step sank to the ankle, cold dampness seeping through his socks, gnawing steadily at his toes. He kept his rifle slung, but ready, gloved fingers brushing the stock. His breath rose in slow, controlled plumes. Years of training had taught him how to hide the shiver that passed through his body, but he felt it all the same. Behind him, Marek struggled to match his pace. The younger soldier's breath came faster, harsher, small clouds bursting from his lips. Anyella limped, her hand pressing against her injured arm, the fabric beneath her palm dark and stiff. Marek coughed, but raised a shaky hand. Tomek rolled onto his back, wheezing, one leg twitching in pain. "Barely. That thing. What the hell was that?" Elias looked at the sealed ruin. The gap was gone. Entirely. As though it had never existed. The monastery's interior lay buried under tons of stone. And yet, the whisper reached him through the wind. Faint, fragile, terrifying. "Nishkonchelishme, we are not finished." Elias's breath hitched, but the others hadn't heard it. Anyella limped closer to him. "Sergeant, what now?" He scanned the forest beyond the courtyard. The storm was easing just enough for him to see the tree line clearly, a dark, dense wall of pine and shadow. Their footprints from earlier were long erased. The enemy patrol could be anywhere. And behind them lay the ruins of a monastery that seemed determined to keep its dead company. "We head west," Elias said. "Find the trail. Regroup with the others. Whatever happened in there, we leave it behind." Tomek struggled to stand, leaning heavily on Marek. "God, I hope you're right." But as they turned toward the trees, Elias felt it, an uncomfortable certainty settling in his chest like a stone. Whatever stepped through the wall was not trapped by the collapse. It was following them. The forest wind shifted, branches creaked, and behind them, from somewhere deep within the ruins, a faint glow pulsed once, twice,
like the beating of a distant heart. The forest swallowed them as soon as they left the last broken wall behind. Dense, towering pines leaned inward like conspirators, their snow-laden branches forming a jagged canopy that turned the sky into a narrow, bruised ribbon of gray. The storm had eased into a fine, drifting snow, each flake catching what little light remained and sinking softly onto the untouched ground. The world felt muted, sound dampened, color drained, as if they had stepped into a photograph that someone had started to erase. Elias led the way, his boots crunching through the crusted snow. Every step sank to the ankle, cold dampness seeping through his socks, gnawing steadily at his toes. He kept his rifle slung, but ready, gloved fingers brushing the stock. His breath rose in slow, controlled plumes. Years of training had taught him how to hide the shiver that passed through his body, but he felt it all the same. Behind him, Marek struggled to match his pace. The younger soldier's breath came faster, harsher, small clouds bursting from his lips. Aniela limped, her hand pressing against her injured arm, the fabric beneath her palm dark and stiff. Marek coughed, but raised a shaky hand. Tomek rolled onto his back, wheezing, one leg twitching in pain. "Barely. That thing. What the hell was that?" Elias turned his head just enough to meet the younger man's eyes. "If there's something useful there, I'll signal you. If there's trouble, you'll hear it. Either way, I move faster by myself." Marek's grip tightened. His pupils were huge, swallowing the shrinking pale light. For a moment, Elias saw not a soldier, but a boy dragged too early into something he didn't fully understand. Slowly, Marek released his sleeve. Elias stepped forward, the snow crunching underfoot. The air felt thicker here, pressing tight against his chest. He forced his breathing to remain calm, measured, counting silently with each inhale and exhale. He approached the dark shape, weapon lowered but ready. As he drew closer, details emerged. A sloped roof weighed down by snow, timbers warped by years of weather. A narrow chimney leaning at an angle like a cracked spine. The little cabin sat half sunken into the hillside, its small square window filmed with frost. No light behind it. The door hung slightly ajar, snow piled against the threshold. Relief and suspicion flooded him simultaneously. "Cabin," he called softly over his shoulder. "Looks abandoned. No tracks." He heard the others begin to move. Elias approached the door, nudging it open with the barrel of his rifle. It creaked inward, the sound shrill in the quiet. Cold, stale air met him, tinged with the faintest hint of old smoke and damp wood. He stepped inside. The interior was small, barely larger than a storage shed. A single cot rested against the far wall, frame rusted, mattress sagging and torn. A narrow stone hearth crouched in one corner, empty but for ancient ashes. Shelves lined one wall, holding a rusted lantern, a few cracked ceramic mugs, and a wooden box that had long since warped. But most importantly, the walls were solid. No cracks, no strange fissures, no pulsing amber light. Just old timber and silence. The others joined him, stamping snow from their boots. The air warmed slightly from the combined body heat. "Thank God," Aniela muttered, sagging onto the cot despite its protests. The springs groaned but held. She cradled her injured arm, jaw clenched as the pain flared in the relative warmth. Marek shut the door, sealing out the wind. The sudden quiet pressed in on them, thick and intimate. His breathing slowed, but his eyes still roamed the corners of the room as if expecting the walls here to begin whispering too. Tomek collapsed near the hearth, rubbing his thigh. "I can't feel my toes. That either means I'm warming up or parts of me have died. Let's assume the first." Elias moved to the shelves, lifting the warped box. It fell apart in his hands, revealing nothing but mouse droppings and fragments of brittle paper. He checked under the cot, ran his fingers along the cracks in the wooden floor. No traps, no hidden compartments, no signs of recent habitation. He exhaled slowly. We can make a fire. Carefully. Minimal smoke, we stay low, and we don't let it get big enough to be seen from a distance. What about patrols? Marek asked. If they're close enough to smell the smoke in this wind, they're close enough that we're already dead. No one argued. They worked in silence. Elias broke apart one of the rotting shelves for kindling, choosing the driest pieces. Marek scraped out the old ashes, his hands shaking only slightly. Aniela used her knife and her teeth to tear a strip of cloth from her own undershirt and wrap her arm tighter, hissing as the fabric touched the wound. Tomek dug through his pack, producing a small metal tin. Fire starting kit, for when we're not running from collapsing medieval nightmares. The first spark took on the third try. A thin curl of smoke rose, then a fragile flame licked at the splintered wood. They all watched it grow as if hypnotized, something primal inside them reaching for that tiny beacon of warmth and normality. When the fire finally caught, filling the cabin with a flickering orange glow, Elias felt his shoulders loosen for the first time since the monastery. The light painted the walls in soft, shifting patterns. Shadows danced behind the chairs, along the ceiling beams, across the cot where Aniela lay. The smell of burning wood filled the space, earthy and familiar. Marek held his hands inches from the flames, sighing as feeling prickled painfully back into his fingers. I thought we were done for back there, he murmured. When the tower fell, I thought that was it. Tomek let his head fall back against the wall. We'll have time to be traumatized later, kid. Aniela's eyes flicked to Elias. Will we, though? She met his gaze. Her question wasn't rhetorical. Whatever that was, it came through the stones like they weren't there. The monastery collapsed, and yet I can't shake the feeling that if we stepped back inside, it would still be standing, just sideways. Sideways? Marek frowned. You know what I mean? Wrong. Tilted. Like reality bent around it and then snapped back. Elias stared into the fire, its reflected light burning tiny suns in his pupils. He blinked, and they were just flames again. It spoke Polish, he said finally. Very clearly, it told me not to run. And when we got out, I heard it say, we weren't finished. The words settled over the group like fresh snow, silent, heavy, chilling. Marek swallowed audibly. Spirits, he whispered. Tomek scoffed, but the sound was weak. Spirits don't collapse towers on themselves. Don't they? Marek shot back, surprisingly fierce. My grandfather always said the mountains don't forget. Elias opened his mouth to shut this down, to drag them back to a safer, more rational ground. But something stopped him.
The sense of being watched from inside the wall, the way the stone had vibrated under his palm. Whatever it was, he said, voice low, it's behind us now. He wanted to believe that. He didn't. Aniela shifted again, trying to find a position that hurt less. Did you notice the way it moved, the air around it? She asked. Like heat over asphalt in summer, but it was freezing. Marek hugged himself, and the glow, like embers, or eyes, or both. They fell into silence again, the crackle of the fire the only sound. Outside, the wind rose briefly, rattling the cabin walls. Snow brushed against the window with a faint, scratchy hiss, like fingernails on glass. The structure groaned quietly, a normal, reasonable noise of wood settling in the cold. Elias still flinched. He forced himself to focus. We rest here for a few hours, he said, 2 at most, then we move again. The longer we stay in one place, the easier it is to track us.
"Who's tracking us more?" Tomek muttered. "The enemy, or whatever we left in that monastery?" No one answered. After a while, Merrick dozed off, his head slumped forward, lips parted. Tomek's eyes grew heavy, blinking slower and slower until his chin slid onto his chest. Aniela pretended to sleep, but Elias could see from her breathing that she hovered just at the edge, unwilling to fully surrender her awareness. Elias remained awake. He sat with his back against the wall opposite the window, watching the snow blur the world outside. The fire had settled into a steady glow, embers pulsing softly like buried coals. Shadows swayed gently across the walls, rising and falling, expanding and contracting with the light. He told himself he was imagining the patterns. He told himself the movements were random. But some part of his brain kept tracing lines, forming shapes, tall, vaguely human silhouettes leaning closer, then retreating. His eyelids grew heavy despite him. The adrenaline of the past hours finally began to ebb, leaving behind a deep, dragging fatigue that pulled at his limbs. His head dipped forward once, twice. He forced his eyes open. The cabin was dimmer now. The embers glowed faintly red. His 3 soldiers were silent and still, their breathing shallow and even. Outside, the wind had died almost completely. The world was suddenly, unnervingly calm. Too calm. He realized with a start what was wrong. There was no sound at all. No creak of the timbers, no shifting of snow from the roof, no distant owl, no rustle of branches. Absolute silence. Elias's skin crawled. He lifted his head, heartbeat hammering. The air inside the cabin felt thicker, heavier, as though it had gained weight in the space of a few breaths. Each inhale was slightly harder than the last. He slowly turned his gaze toward the wall to his right. The wooden boards were no longer still. They were pulsing. Barely. A subtle expansion and contraction, like lungs drawing in and out. The faint seams between the planks seemed to swell, then shrink, as though something behind them was pushing softly, testing the barrier. Elias froze. His fingers resting on his rifle tensed. The board swelled again, just a fraction more. A hairline crack appeared near the floor, stretching upward like a thin, dark thread. From it came a sound, soft, familiar, a whisper dragged slowly through the timber. This time the voice didn't bother with words. It only laughed. The cabin shuddered, and the walls began to whisper.
The crack reached halfway up the wall now, a thin black wound snaking toward the ceiling. From within, a faint amber glow began to bleed out, the same color as the fissure in the monastery. The hue of embers buried in ash, of something smoldering without burning. Aniela swallowed. "Sergeant," she said, never taking her eyes off it, "if this place goes down like the tower did, the snow will bury us alive. We're sitting in a coffin waiting for someone to nail the lid." The boards trembled, dust drifted from the ceiling beams. Another whisper dragged through. This time, it wasn't just Elias's name. Merrick's head snapped sideways as if struck. He staggered, one hand clamping over his ear. It just said my grandmother's name," he stammered. How does it know that?" Tomek flinched, his knuckles whitening around the grip of his rifle. "It said my father's." He glanced at Elias, panic cracking through his usual sarcasm. "I don't talk about him, ever. Nobody here." The glow brightened, pulsing like a heartbeat. Aniela inhaled sharply, shoulder hitting the wall behind her.
It knows mine too. The timber rasped as something on the other side of the wall shifted, pushing gently against the boards. They bowed inward, an almost delicate gesture as if testing how much it could press without breaking. Elias stepped forward. "Stay back," Agnella hissed. But he was already moving, cutting across the cramped space, the fire's dying light painting his face in flickering orange and shadow. His boots thudded softly on the floorboards. He stopped just out of reach of the wall, the glow staining the side of his face a sickly amber. The crack had reached the ceiling now. The wall looked like it had been unzipped from floor to roof. The air streaming out of it washed over him, heavy with a familiar scent. Dust, stone, old incense, and blood. "Why us?" he asked quietly. The other stared. "Sergeant?" Marek whispered. Elias raised his voice, directing his words toward the trembling timber. "Why us? There are villages, outposts, an entire front line of soldiers out there. Why follow 4 people through the snow?" For a moment, there was only the soft hiss of air slipping through the crack. Then, very slowly, the wall answered. The whisper that came was not quite a voice and not quite an echo. It carried strange cadences, as if 100 mouths were trying to speak in unison and failing to sync perfectly. Beneath the words lay other sounds, distant screams, the crash of falling rock, the muffled crack of rifles from another century. "You touched us." Elias's mind flashed back to his palm pressed against the monastery pillar, to the subtle vibration humming through the stone. "The pillar," he breathed. Marek's eyes darted between him and the wall. "What?" "In the hall," Elias said. "When you first talked about the whispers, I checked the stone. I clenched the jaw. I made contact." The wall shivered with what might have been amusement. "Found you. Held on." Tomek swore under his breath. "You picked up a haunted echo like it was a parasite. That's just brilliant, Sergeant." Agnella's eyes narrowed. "No, that's not how this feels." She studied the wall with the sharp, focused intensity she used when dismantling a rifle. "This is not just in him. It's around us. It's like we're in the center of something much bigger, like we stepped into a memory and it closed over our heads." The amber glow pulsed again, and with it came a rush of sound, brief, chaotic, like someone lifting a lid off a cauldron of trapped noise. Elias heard the clang of armor. Marek flinched at the crack of old muskets. Agnella's hand tightened over her bandaged arm as distant chanting swelled, Latin phrases dissolving into static. Then, as if a hand slammed the lid back down, the sounds cut off. Silence. Elias's throat felt dry. "What are you?" he asked. The whisper answered instantly as though waiting for that question. "Stone that remembers." The crack widened at the center, the boards bowing outward before splitting with a wet, splintering sound. A thin strip of darkness opened between them, no wider than a finger, but what lay beyond was not the freezing hillside. It was the monastery. Not as they had left it, broken, caved in, buried under its own weight, but whole, looming, lit from within by dozens of wavering flames. The main hall stretched out in impossible perspective, the pillars unbroken, banners hanging from the ceiling, their colors dimmed by smoke. Figures moved through the corridor beyond the fracture, robed monks with shaved heads, soldiers in armor, villagers clutching candles, all overlapping, all transparent, each scene flickering through the others like layers of half-forgotten film. Agnella whispered a curse. Marek recoiled, knocking over a metal cup that clattered to the floor and rolled in frantic circles. Tomek stared, his voice gone thin. That's centuries." The voices bled through now, no longer whispers, but a low, steady murmur. Prayers, orders, sobs, the crackle of fire. It wasn't just a sound, it was a pressure, pressing against their eardrums and then deeper, pushing against their thoughts. Elias stepped closer without realizing it. The scene inside the fracture shifted. The monks vanished, the armor dimmed, the banners blackened and curled as smoke thickened. Fire licked up the walls, turning the air orange. People ran, men, women, children,
Faces twisted in terror as the ceiling rained burning debris. Some pounded on the stones with bleeding hands as doors jammed shut. Others knelt where they were, eyes lifted, mouths moving in desperate prayer. The sensation hit Elias like a blow. Panic, suffocation, heat so intense it seemed to strip the air of oxygen. He staggered, gasping, one hand going to his chest. The others felt it too. Marek dropped to one knee. Can't breathe. Aniela squeezed her eyes shut, teeth clenched in pain as tears forced themselves out. Make it stop. Tomek's fingers scrabbled for the wall behind him. It's inside my head, it's inside. The voices surged, overlapping until one cut through, clear and sharp. Not from the past, from now.
Help us? The words were spoken in perfectly modern Polish, the accent local to these mountains. They weren't centuries old. Elias shook his head, forcing himself to focus. How? He rasped. This is history. It's not finished, the wall answered. The fracture pulsed like a wound. Buried, alive, forgotten, screaming, in the stone. Every war, every fire, every prayer, unanswered. Images flashed faster now, too quickly to separate. Soldiers from different eras falling in the courtyard, a man kneeling in a dark cell carving a name into the wall with shaking hands, a woman clutching a child as the roof collapsed, a regiment using the monastery as a stronghold and leaving it full of unmarked graves. Elias understood then. The monastery hadn't just hosted centuries of lives, it had kept them. He forced his voice steady. We can't undo hundreds of years, he said. We can't... Not asking. The glow dimmed. For a moment, the fracture narrowed, as if the force behind it was drawing back, bracing. Then the whispers came again, this time overlapping in a strange rhythmic pattern, like different voices trying to speak through the same mouth. Free us, or join. The last word echoed, stretching, bending. The cabin creaked as if its foundation had shifted. Snow slid from the roof outside in a muffled thump. Marek let out a hysterical laugh. So those are our choices? He choked. Break a few centuries worth of curses or become permanent roommates. Tomek bared his teeth in something like a grin. Could be worse, could be conscription. Aniela stared at Elias. She studied every line in his face, reading the decision forming there. You know what happens if we try to just walk away, she said quietly. Elias did. He felt it in the way the air grew heavier the further they tried to deny it, in the way the fractures followed, from stone walls to wooden ones, in the way the voices were getting stronger, not weaker, the longer they tried to flee. It's not bound to the ruin anymore. It's bound to us. To me. His jaw clenched. If we run, it spreads. Into every building we enter, every wall we lean against, every bunker we hide in, until one day it decides it's done asking nicely. Silence stretched. The fire was nearly out now, the embers dimming to a dull, sullen red. The only real light came from the fracture in the wall, bathing our faces in cold amber. Finally, Aniela nodded once. Then we go back, she said. Finish it, or die trying. Tomek stared at her. Aniela, you can't be serious. You can barely lift your arm. My leg is one strong breeze away from giving out. Marek's one whisper away from a breakdown. And our sergeant is apparently haunted property. We're not a squad, we're a very sad joke. If we're dead anyway, she replied, I'd like to choose how. Marek's lips trembled. We don't even know what to do up there. Walk in and ask politely? Hello, centuries of trapped suffering? Would you be so kind as to let go? Elias looked back at the fracture. The monastery scenes shifted again, slower now, as if whatever lay behind the wall was listening. Every time it spoke, the stone reacted,
The pillars, the walls, the boards here. It's pressure, contained pressure, built from centuries of deaths and wars and prayers that never left. If it's stone that remembers, maybe freeing it means making it forget? Tomek offered. Elias shook his head. No, giving it somewhere to go. A release, the way sound escapes when you open a door in a sealed room. The monastery was designed to hold. Maybe we make it fail, finally. Marek stared blankly. By collapsing it, we already did that. Not enough, Aniela murmured. That was just the tower. The idea of the place is still standing. Then what? Tomek demanded. What does it want? The whisper came again, softer now, almost pleading. Open, the heart. Images fluttered across the fracture. A hidden stair spiraling downward, a low chamber lit by candles, a massive stone slab carved with names, symbols half worn by time, a single ring of iron set into the floor, ringed by dark stains. Aniela inhaled slowly. There's a crypt, she said, under the main hall. A vault, Elias added. If the monastery was used as a stronghold, they wouldn't just bury bodies at random. They'd have a central ossuary, a heart. Marek swallowed, his throat bobbing visibly. And we open it, he whispered. And then what? Whatever's in there just walks away. The glow dimmed, as if the thing beyond the wall had exhausted itself with that last image. Elias's decision solidified like ice. We can't like it, we just have to do it. We go back, find that crypt, and open whatever seal is holding all this in place. If we're lucky, the energy disperses. The stone forgets, or lets go, or whatever passes for peace in a place like that. And if we're not lucky? Tomek asked. Elias held his gaze. Then it finishes what it started in that hall.
Marek's laugh was brittle. So our choices are, die slowly in a spreading nightmare, or die quickly in a contained one. Aniela's mouth corked. He always wanted clarity. Tomek closed his eyes for a moment, exhaled hard, then nodded once. Fine, he muttered. If I'm going to be a ghost, I'd rather haunt somewhere dramatic. The walls shivered, the fracture flickering, the images within stuttering like a film reel reaching its end. Elias stepped closer one last time. If we do this, he said softly, you let go. All of you. You stop whispering through walls, you stop pulling at people who don't know your names. You rest. For the first time, the answer came not as a fragmented murmur, but as a single, clear word, spoken in dozens of overlapping voices. Deal. The board snapped back into place with a sudden bone-deep crack. The fracture sealed. The glow vanished. The cabin dimmed to near total darkness, lit only by the faint dying embers in the hearth. The air lightened. Sound returned. The soft hiss of snow on the roof, the distant moan of the wind through the trees, the creak of old timber settling. The walls were only walls again. Marek sagged against the door, breathing hard. Did we just make a pact with a haunted building? With everything trapped in it, Aniela corrected quietly. Tomek reached for his pack with a grimace, tightening the straps. Let's get this over with before I remember I'm a coward. Elias moved to the small window and pushed aside the frost-slick curtain with his gloved knuckles. Outside, the night had deepened into a heavy, starless dark. The outline of the monastery rose against the horizon, a crooked silhouette, distant but unmistakable, its broken tower a jagged tooth against the sky. Except now, faintly, very faintly, a glow pulsed from its depths, like a heart beating. He straightened, skin prickling. Gear up, he said. We're going back. Marek stared at him, exhausted panic warring with a strange, grim resolve. If we open that crypt, he whispered, and it's worse than we think? Elias pulled the bolt on his rifle, the sound sharp in the small room. Then, he said, eyes fixed on the distant ruin. "You definitely wouldn't want to be in our shoes." Outside, somewhere deep within the mountain, the monastery stones shuddered in anticipation, waiting for them to return.
The wind cut through the forest in long, uneven currents as they left the cabin behind, each step sinking deeper into the thickening snow. The night had settled fully, turning the world into a vast, frozen void where the trees loomed like black pillars of an ancient temple. The sky above was starless, swallowed by a low ceiling of clouds that pulsed faintly with the reflection of distant lightning, though no thunder ever followed. Elias moved at the front, boots crunching steadily, breath clouding in ragged bursts. The weight of what awaited them in the ruins ahead pressed against him like the air before a storm. He could feel it now, the same way he felt the pressure of the mountain's altitude in his ears, a low, constant hum, carrying fragments of sound too faint to be called whispers, but too purposeful to be ignored. The monastery was calling. Marek trudged behind him, muttering under his breath, the syllables broken and shaky. Tomek limped, leaning heavily on a thick branch he'd fashioned into a crude cane. And Yella kept pace silently, her injured arm pressed tightly to her chest, her face set with a determination that bordered on frightening. The forest thinned as they approached the slope leading to the ruins. Snow rolled down in pale waves, the trees bowing outward as if refusing to stand too close to what lay ahead. The monastery appeared slowly, first its shattered towers, then the jagged arches, then the broken courtyard swallowed by drifts. It looked like a corpse someone had tried to bury but left only half covered. Yet the glow remained, a faint amber pulse deep in the stone, beating with slow, unnatural rhythm. Tomek groaned softly. "It looks worse than before," he murmured, "like it's melting." And it did. Parts of the structure sagged in ways that defied gravity, stones bending inward like softened wax. Other places had warped upward as if pulled toward the sky by unseen strings. "This is wrong," Marek whispered. "Buildings don't do that." "Nothing about tonight has been what buildings do," and Yella replied. Elias stopped at the edge of the courtyard. It was almost exactly where they had stood hours earlier, but the snow had shifted, the debris settled differently, and the air carried a strange warmth, like breath from the mouth of a cave. "We go to the main hall," Elias said. "Same entrance as before." "And pray it's still there," Tomek muttered. They waded through the drifts, passing broken pillars and collapsed walls. Each ruin felt like an open wound. Some stones seemed to throb. Others exhaled faint cold mist when they stepped near. Elias didn't let the others slow down. At the base of the main tower's remains, the entrance yawned like a dark throat. Snow had filled most of the doorway, but a narrow passage remained, leading downward into the hall. Marek grabbed Elias's sleeve as he approached. "Sergeant, before we go in." His eyes were enormous, reflecting the faint amber glow like liquid metal. "If we don't make it." "We're making it," Elias said firmly. "But if we don't?" "We are," Elias insisted. "All of us." Marek nodded, though his breathing remained uneven. And Yella pushed past them. "Let's end this before the walls grow mouths again." Inside, the air changed instantly. The cold outside had been sharp, crystalline. In the hall, the temperature dropped into something deeper, an ancient cold, untouched by wind or frost. a cold that felt like soil packed over coffins. Their footsteps echoed strangely, the sound stretching too far, as if the space around them was larger than the physical room allowed. Elias flicked on his flashlight, but the beam bent toward the floor before stabilizing, as though something had pressed down on it. "Deep breaths," he murmured. "Stay close." The hall had changed since the collapse. The debris was pushed aside in unnatural patterns, forming a winding path leading deeper, weaving through the shadows like a tunnel carved by unseen hands. And along the walls, those walls that had once whispered, names were now visible. Hundreds of them, thousands, carved by different hands across centuries, overlapping, fading, smeared, etched again, forming a tapestry of the dead. Marek reached out with trembling fingers, but stopped just before touching the stone. "These weren't here before." "They were," Aniela said quietly, "just not visible." The monastery had decided to reveal them. Elias pressed forward.
The path turned sharply. At the end, the floor sloped downward, a steep ramp made of polished stone, impossibly clean compared to the ruin around it. It led beneath the monastery, into the hidden crypt they'd glimpsed through the fracture in the cabin. The air grew thicker as they descended. Every breath felt like inhaling water. The pressure around them intensified, squeezing their lungs. But the amber glow brightened, guiding them like a lantern through the dark. Below, the corridor opened into a vast chamber. The crypt, the heart. It stretched out before them like the inside of a mountain. Arched ceiling lost in darkness, rows of stone pillars carved with spirals and symbols long eroded by time. A great circular platform at the center. In the middle of the platform lay the slab they had seen earlier. A massive stone lid carved with names, runes, and a single iron ring. Around the platform, the air shimmered with faint silhouettes. Some knelt, some stood, all watched. None had eyes. Tomek stumbled back. "Nope, no, this is... Steady," Elias said. His voice came out softer than intended. His throat had tightened around the sight. Aniela's breathing turned shallow. "This is a mass grave. Not bodies. Memories. Centuries of them." The silhouettes flickered in and out, some stretched thin like smoke, others dense as shadow. The glow inside them pulsed in unison with the faint beating from the slab. Elias stepped toward the platform. Every figure shifted, following him with hollow faces. The chamber whispered. 1,000 voices exhaled through the stone. "Open the heart." Marek whimpered, covering his ears. "Stop it," he begged. "Please." The voices softened instantly. Elias approached the slab and gripped the iron ring. It was cold, not metal cold, but bone cold, as if he were touching something that had never known warmth. "Ready?" he asked, though none of them truly were. Aniela stepped beside him, placing her uninjured hand on the opposite edge. Tomek limped forward and rested his palm next to hers, knuckles white with fear. After a moment, Marek joined them, trembling so violently his hand rattled against the stone. Elias tightened his grip. "On 3, he said. He didn't get to 1. The slab pulsed beneath their hands, then released a low, resonant groan that vibrated through the stone and into their bones. Light surged along the engraved names, first a dim glow, then bright enough to cast shifting shadows across the chamber. The iron ring jerked upward, nearly tearing out of Elias's grasp. "Hold it!" he shouted. Together, they lifted. The slab resisted at first, as if cemented by centuries of pressure. But then something beneath it exhaled, a long, anguished sigh, and the weight suddenly shifted. The slab rose. A rush of air burst upward, carrying the sense of damp soil, old paper, burned incense, and an underlying bitterness like blood turned to dust. The chamber darkened, then flooded with light. Not amber this time, white, blinding. It surged out in a wave that hit them full force, knocking all four to their knees. The silhouettes around the platform convulsed, their forms expanding, contracting, shuddering in ecstatic release. Some rose like smoke rings and burst silently. Others stretched toward the vaulted ceiling before dissolving into motes of shimmering dust. Merrick sobbed into his hands. Tomek stared upward, tears streaming down his cheeks without him noticing. Aniela's breath caught, her face illuminated in stark, trembling light. Elias felt it wash through him, an avalanche of emotion not his own. Grief, terror, rage, resignation, hope, despair, love, loss, memories spilling out like water from a shattered dam. Visions exploded behind his eyes. Monks carrying torches through flooded corridors, villagers trapped under fallen beams, soldiers firing from the battlements, bodies piled in snowdrifts, a child hiding under the altar, clutching a carved wooden toy. And through it all, the stone watching, remembering, holding, until now. The light intensified, sweeping through the pillars, racing up the walls. Cracks burst open, not with destruction, but with release. Every fracture spilling more white radiance, unraveling the weight of centuries. The chamber roared like 1,000 voices crying out in one final breath. Then, silence. The light collapsed inward in a single, soundless implosion. Darkness fell. Not the oppressive dark from before, a clean dark, a peaceful one. Elias blinked as his eyes adjusted. The slab lay shattered, pieces scattered like broken eggshells. The air smelled fresher, as if the room had been aired out for the first time in centuries. The silhouettes were gone, every single one. Aniela exhaled slowly. "It's over," she whispered, almost not believing it. Merrick let out a broken laugh that turned into a sob. "We did it." Tomek wiped his face, sniffed loudly, then muttered, "I want a month-long bath." Elias rose unsteadily. The pressure in the air had vanished. The walls felt inert, just stone, just history, not memory. And for the first time since stepping into Kristowo, he couldn't hear any whispers, only the distant wind through the corridor. He turned to the others. "Let's get out of here." They climbed back up the slope. The monastery no longer glowed, no longer bent or breathed. It was nothing more than a ruin now, a corpse finally laid to rest. As they stepped into the open air, snowflakes drifted softly around them, gentle, harmless. The sky cleared just enough for a single star to appear. Merrick noticed it first. "Look," he whispered. It's beautiful." Tomek clapped him on the shoulder. "You're going to be intolerable after this, aren't you?" Aniela smiled faintly despite her pain. "Let him have it." Elias glanced back one last time. The monastery stood silent. No breath, no glow, no eyes in the dark. Only stone. Only peace. He turned toward the forest. Home. Before something else remembers we're here. They walked into the dawn, snow crunching beneath their boots, shadows lengthening behind them. But no whispers followed. No shapes in the trees. No glow in the ruins. Just 4 survivors, leaving behind a place where no one would ever hear the walls whisper again.